up on today's episode of Technoid. This will be my last video for this week, guys. I will explain during the video, but this will be a big episode, so definitely stay tuned. We're going to talk about two smartphones that were released and why one of them is probably one I am actually a little more intrigued about. Also in this episode, we will talk about Apple and what they possibly got up their sleeves and something in a rare shock of moves. All that and more coming up on today's episode, so stay tuned. YouTube, what's poppin'? Michael here, welcome back to Technoid. Now guys, this, as I said at the beginning of the episode, is my last video for this week. There are a little bit of tests and exams, and also I will be away, so I really have to use the time that I have to focus on my exams. We're almost halfway through the semester, so hopefully things will start to be a little bit more easier from this point forward. But I hope you guys understand, I'm just taking this time off just to focus, regroup, and then I'll be back next week and we'll have a little bit more daily videos. So today's episode is going to be very, very long, so I definitely hope you're able to stay tuned and watch the whole thing. So without further ado, let's get this going. So story number one, let's start it up. Let's get the boring stuff out of the way. Let's talk Apple. Of course, I had to say they were boring. But story number one does involve Apple. So basically, Apple might be considering something very, very strange, and I'm a little on this, but I wouldn't rule it out because Apple is known to be making some of these types of moves, and honestly, it's an intriguing move on Apple's part. It looks like Apple will be opening up third-party apps and third-party accessories and other things to be default browsers, default music players, default anything on the iPhone. Now this is a big thing because Apple never really lets you choose default things. Where on Android you could pick over everything, like Samsung, even though they try to push Bixby, you don't have to be limited to their stuff. So by Apple opening up the field and allowing people to choose what they want to use, it will make a big difference, in my opinion, for not only their ecosystem, but also make a difference for the consumer. You're giving more customization and you're giving a lot more flexible leisure to people that like things like Spotify and things that people like Google Chrome, etc. Keeping up on Spotify, this would also open the doors for Spotify to now be the default music browser for the HomePod, Apple TV, everything else. Now, I want to say this, I have switched over to Spotify. I have been an Apple Music user for almost all my life, with the exception of iTunes before Apple Music. I've used Apple Music, I like it, but now that I'm using Android, I've switched over to Spotify, so I will definitely give an in-depth review later on in the month when I finally distinguish which one I prefer. But that would be cool that Apple will allow Spotify to be a default music browser. Personally, I don't think it's going to happen, but you know something? If Apple goes in this route where they're considering these options, it's a smart move on them, for the market, everything to come, and I think it makes sense. Alright, so now that we've got that out of the way, story number two, we gotta pick this up a little bit. Apple's latest patent, of course, whatever is with these patents, but Apple's latest patent is showing that they will actually be working on a home audio theater setup. So basically, a lot of users have said that the HomePod is something that could have been used as a soundbar, and even though the HomePod sounds fantastic, it's not a soundbar. Well, it looks like from the patent, Apple is working on a surround sound system that I would assume would work with, Apple TV and other accessories by allowing good enabled audio coming from a surround sound with a subwoofer and possibly HomePod implementations in there as well. Now for me, I think this is a smart move because Apple does make good audio products whether you want to agree or not. I think Apple has the technology, has the people, and it has everything it could need to excel. My only concern is the pricing and also how they fit in with the market. You saw what they did with the HomePod. Look at what Sonos, Bose, and LG are doing in soundbars compared to Apple. If they tip their hat in, they're gonna have to do something that's very revolutionary, and I just don't think Apple could do it, but of course, I have been wrong before. That's not the first time. So now that we're done with Apple, let's continue. Now let's talk OnePlus. So following up on the OnePlus 8 and 8 Pro, a supposed image of the phone and its tech spec sheet has leaked online, and everything about the phone is pretty much here. As you could see, it says that the phone will have 12 gigs of RAM and 256 SSD. The phone will have a punch hole design and will have a 120 Hz display. And honestly, to me, that's good enough. That's actually good enough for a smartphone. I don't think you really need to go 16 gigabytes or 24, 32 gigabytes of RAM. That's ridiculous. I think 12 gigabytes with 120 hertz display and 256 SSD, that's more than enough. Honestly, I give OnePlus applaud because I know for a fact that they're going to make this phone cheap and affordable by giving you premium specs at the same time. And also the camera specs are in there, but I don't think you care about the camera. So that's it for the OnePlus 8. Now let's move on to the main topic of the show. Let's talk LG and Sony. So we're going to talk LG first because I'm not too enthusiastic with LG, but I definitely think there's some potential here. So LG has released the ThinQ V60, something like that, the V60 ThinQ, whatever it's called. It is a follow-up to the L50 or whatever it's called. Again, I don't follow LG that much. But the intriguing thing about this phone is that it is looking to be a pretty good upgrade from its predecessor, ditching the Apple notch for a different punch hole kind of teardrop notch. It looks really nice, has a nice OLED display, and keeps the headphone jack. So what do you know, LG, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Also continuing, there is an accessory feature add-on which will allow you to use a dual screen. So LG, it looks like they want to go into the market to compete against Microsoft, Samsung with the foldable tablets, and it has a case that will have one part is screen. You connect your phone into the case and it will allow you to use a dual screen, which again, I still have some trouble seeing, but it has potential. So I think LG definitely is doing a good job this year on their smartphones. Pricing is not available yet. We will know more about it in the coming week. And they said that the carriers will announce their version and it will come in 5G. So you have nothing to worry about. And last story, the main topic of the story, the Sony Xperia 1 Mark II, whatever that name is. Now, this phone is very intriguing to me, and I put out on my poll if you consider it a good phone for the money, and a lot of people said yes and no, but honestly, this phone is very intriguing. So Sony, as you know, they make very good products, from the PlayStation to their televisions to pretty much anything. Honestly, their cameras and their smartphones are no exception. They were known to have the world's first 4K OLED display, which really isn't a big whoop, but considering that it is the first, it is impressive on its own. This year they continue with a new triple camera setup with professional grade cameras. They also incorporate a lot of things that smartphone users really use. The headphone jack, again, props to Sony for keeping that. High-res audio in the headphone jack as well. Also dual speakers, a nice notchless display with a chin and a bezel perfectly balanced, and the performance of the 865 optimized with what they're giving you. This phone actually is really intriguing, and I think people should take an eye on this phone. Yeah, it's probably going to be expensive and it's probably going to be a lot of money, but if you look at Sony and their proposition and what they're offering in this phone, it's honestly cool. You've got your fast charging, your wireless charging, you've got 3 cameras that Sony makes. Now you gotta remember, Sony makes some impressive cameras. Sony's cameras are possibly some of the top 5 best cameras on the market. They're in one of the top 5s. And the fact that their mobile phones have 4K OLED display technology with 90 hertz. You don't even need 120 hertz, but 90 hertz, that's impressive. And honestly, I'm intrigued because look, you've got the headphone jack, you have a notchless display, which looks nice in my opinion. I think that design fits perfectly like with the Google Pixel 4. And honestly, if it was priced at around $799, $899, I could make an argument for that phone. Because honestly, I have no regrets switching to the Note 10, but that Sony phone is very intriguing. So I would urge you guys to definitely do a little bit more research on this phone. The pricing, again, is not known, but I will update everybody on the LG and Sony. And the reason I say you guys should do some research, because if you're looking to switch for a good, powerful phone with good lenses, good camera, definitely look at Sony. I wouldn't throw them under the bus. And honestly, this new smartphone looks really good. It kind of reminds me of the iPhone 4S. Did they steal the design? I don't know. But anyway, that's it for today's episode of Technoid. So guys, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, hit that like button. If you disliked the video, hit that dislike button. Thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, guys, I will see you next week. Have a great rest of your day and peace.